Thieves is a game like no other. As an online sandbox game, by nature each play session is unique, largely because of the fact that no matter what, players are forced to sail the seas together in the same server. These aspects of the game are what makes it so refreshing to play, as it's hard for there not to be any replay value. And while I love sailing the seas, battling other crews, and selling hordes of treasure as much as the next pirate, boy does this game have its problems. So today, I wanted to discuss what makes Sea of Thieves so frustratingly excellent. A large component of online games are the communities that keep them alive, and Sea of Thieves is no different. The most interesting part of the game is seeing sails on the horizon, because usually those are other players who are unpredictable, unlike AI threats. However, what sucks is that so many people cannot comprehend what Sea of Thieves is on a fundamental level, which ends up souring the experience for what are supposed to be adrenaline-pumping player encounters. You see, Sea of Thieves has PvP, and as I mentioned earlier, players are constantly connected to online servers, so there's no single player. This means that when you're sailing around, other players can roll up on you for any reason. You might have treasure, or they're just looking for a fight. But so many people in the community are shocked by this. Newer players, intermediate players, even some veteran players. They'll get hours worth of treasure on their ship, and before they can sell it, someone comes and sinks them and they lose it all, and then they'll go to Reddit to complain. Now whose fault is this? Is it the players who don't do research on the games they're playing? Or is it Rare for not better advertising how integral PvP is to the game? I'd say it's both, but I do have to pin the blame on Rare a bit more here. I want to shout out two Sea of Thieves content creators, Blurbs and A Shiny Ray, because they both bring up a phenomenal point. In many recent trailers for Sea of Thieves, Rare hardly advertises the fact that PvP is in the game. They might include a few seconds of combat in their footage, but mostly talk about PvE and their microtransaction shop. So I don't blame anyone who might have Xbox Game Pass and thought the game looked cool for not realizing they're connected to an online PvP server each time they log in. But this kind of miscommunication only ends up hurting the community and leads to incredibly toxic encounters in game. If you attack a ship who you know has a lot of treasure on board, there's a chance you'll get cursed out, have slurs thrown your way, or told, "You're ruining my gaming experience." And on the other side, if you get attacked, the attacking crew might belittle you and make sure you fully understand how worthless of a human being you are for not being able to fend off the attack. Of course, toxic players are the norm in any game that involves PvP, it's just how it is. With Sea of Thieves, however, there's a much bigger chance because the nature of the game is not advertised enough to players, leading to widely incorrect interpretations. Yes, if you decide to spend hours collecting treasure, you can lose it all in minutes if you can't fend off an opposing crew. Yes, anyone can attack you for whatever reason they choose at any time. That's why it's a sandbox game. If you cannot accept this, Sea of Thieves is not the game for you. Don't stress yourself out if you disagree with the game's fundamentals. I do want to mention there is hope in this regard. The creative director at Rare, Mike Chapman, has been teasing at the fact that the game's next content update, Season 8, will be PvP focused, and Blurbs has spoken with a Rare employee about giving newer players proper warnings about the game's mechanics, so let's hope the seas will become less salty than they already are. I gotta go off script for this one because this really pisses me off. The amount of game-breaking bugs in Sea of Thieves is absolutely ridiculous. Now, most games usually have glitches and bugs, you know, it's not out of the norm, no game is perfect. But with Sea of Thieves, we're not just talking about some minor texture glitches or anything like that. We're talking about game-breaking bugs that take place every single play session that just makes some aspects of the game so unenjoyable. So in this part of the video, I'm just going to go through some of that because I just find it to be absolutely ridiculous at this point. The game has to constantly calculate where each ship is on a server, the areas around that ship, players and the bullets they fire. You know, it's a lot to handle. Even after reducing the number of ships per server from 6 to 5, the game still struggles to keep itself running smoothly. This leads to some of the most frustrating experiences. The best example, which I mentioned earlier, is hit registration. If you're boarding someone else's ship and are the better player, you can still lose the fight because the game didn't register your sniper shot, but it registered the damage your opponent did to you. And sometimes you can jump out of the way of a deadly blunderbuss shot and still die because of backtracking. It's not just hit registration that affects PvP, unfortunately. Fans have come up with terms called food reg and bucket reg. Sometimes when you eat food, the game doesn't register it. Or when you bail water from your ship, the game either doesn't collect it or release it. I'm sure you can see how these types of bugs are game breaking, as they directly affect the game's most basic features. But before I move on, I also have to bring up the terrible launch of Season 7. Season 7 was the captaincy update, something long awaited since the game launched in 2018. Now don't get me wrong, this update is awesome and I really enjoy being able to personalize my ship, but it was released as a total mess, even after being delayed twice, coming out in August when it was originally meant to be released in June. The game could not handle the core mechanics of Season 7 at launch. The new menus barely loaded, which might not seem like a big issue, but considering they tracked a new progression system, it was a bit of a nuisance to manage that first week or so. But by far the biggest offender that still leaves a bad taste in my mouth is the saving ship customization feature. On paper, it's a great feature. You pay the shipwright up front to save a combination of ship cosmetics, so each session you don't have to waste time putting them on again. But it didn't come as a surprise that this feature did not work. Players were paying the shipwright over and over again only for ship cosmetics to reset back to default a few sessions later. And this took roughly 2 months to finally be resolved. I mean, come on. The most advertised feature of an update that was delayed twice took 2 months to work as intended? I'm no game developer, and I really don't mean to attack Rare by saying this. It's simply frustrating that as a customer and supporter, you get faulty products upon release. The last point I wanted to touch upon is Rare's inconsistency when interacting with the community. Rare has made it their mission to work alongside us, and in my opinion, they have. They add highly requested features into the game, and rebalance mechanics when we feel they don't work properly. This is why I feel bad for Rare when portions of the community constantly berate them every single time an update comes out. However, on the flip side, Rare also makes very weird decisions without informing us, and I think this kind of inconsistent communication will only bring about tension as opposed to wholehearted support. With Season 7, players can now name their own ships. When you give people access to a naming feature in a game, some people are going to use it seriously, some will make a funny joke, and some will unfortunately use it for hate speech. Now, Rare has been rightfully suspending players from naming their ships if they use it for some form of hate speech or targeted insult. However, a friend of mine recently got their ship naming rights suspended for being a pun with an innuendo, and others have been suspended for even tamer names. The problem here is that anyone suspended for something silly has their ship names reset, are unable to change them, and are unable to view the names and statistics of other ships. A large part of Season 7 is essentially taken away from them. Rare never mention this consequence, nor do they provide any type of warning system to give players the opportunity to change their ship names. If you get caught with something they don't like, it's a flat out suspension until further notice, while being locked out of some great features. There's no mention of when ship naming rights will be returned, so who knows when exactly they'll get around to doing so. Now, I don't think Rare should consult the community on every change they make to the game. Otherwise, we'd have a very different and likely terrible game. But for a company that's so vocal about working alongside its fans, They have to absolutely communicate better when it comes to decisions like this. And I think this goes hand in hand with my earlier point about Rare not advertising the PvP aspect enough in this game. If we want Sea of Thieves to be the best it can be, there needs to be an even better dialogue between Rare and the community. Sea of Thieves is among my favorite games of all time. I think it's an incredible experience you won't find with any other game, and if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend you do if you own an Xbox or gaming PC. But I also think it's important to critique the things you love, to not only keep yourself out of a tunnel-visioned echo chamber, but to ensure they remain high quality. If you want me to discuss more Sea of Thieves, be sure to let me know in the comments below. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks and have a good one.